Sakshi TV special immigration show with attorney Ms. Prashanthi Reddy from the Law Offices of Prashanthi Reddy PLLC. Please note that Sakshi TV now has 3 immigration shows every week. On Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. EST with attorney Ms. Prashanthi Reddy in English. On Thursday at 5:30 p.m. EST with attorney Chand Parvatini. And on Friday at 6 p.m. EST with attorney Bhanu Lindra. Please tune in to ask your questions. If you're an immigration attorney and would like to join our special shows, please email us at usa@sakshi.com or call 866-725-7441. Before we begin the show, please note that the information provided on this show is not a legal advice and is for general informational purposes only. Sakshi TV or its agents will not be responsible for use of information. If you need specific consultation, please contact the attorney directly. Ms. Prashanthi needs no introduction, but if you need consultation, please log on to readyesq.com for contact information. And when you connect with them, don't forget to mention Sakshi TV. From the beginning, readyesq.com has put a wealth of free information and online tools in the hands of the immigrant community and for the benefit of you as employers. The readyesq.com site provides you with latest and cutting-edge information on US immigration law and policies explained in terms you don't have to be a lawyer to understand. Before we go any further, I'd like to apologize for my voice. I have a sore throat. And moving on, today's topic is H1B and H1B registration outlook for this year, updates on H1B registration. We will continue the knowledge session along with the news and latest immigration updates, followed by Q&A. Before we get into the topic, please note that you can call us on the numbers displayed on the screen for questions related to immigration and also ask for tips. Hi, Ms. Reddy. How are you doing?
Hi, Tony. Good, thanks. How are you?
Very well. Thank you, Ms. Reddy. So can we just go straight away to the topic?
Yes. So we want to talk about the electronic registration process updates. And I believe that you have some questions.
Yes, Ms. Reddy, we do have some questions. And the first one is, on what website or platform will USCIS host the electronic H1B registration process?
Right. So we're just going through some frequently asked questions, and we have some updated questions. And since the H1B registration process is actually ending tomorrow, ending on Friday, the 17th at 12 noon, you still have time to register. So we thought it would be a good idea to go through some updated frequently asked questions. USCIS has given some further clarifications on certain questions. So I thought it would be a good time to go through that now. So the first question was that on what website or platform will USCIS host the electronic H1B registration process? So the USCIS website has its own portal, My USCIS online portal. And once you log into that, there is a step-by-step guide. You'll have to create an account on My USCIS website. And then you have to select, instead of, if you're a company, you select H1B registrant, not H1B petitioner, but H1B registrant, because you're not filing a H1B petition right now, you're filing a H1B registration.
Right. So, Ms. Reddy, and the next question is, do lawyers need to create, a person's USCIS account for each client, or can an attorney register one account to manage and file applications for all clients?
So attorneys usually just create one account for themselves. It's a representative account or an attorney account. And with that account, we usually manage multiple clients under that account. So also the system has a recovery feature with a backup code and security questions, and that's there for the petitioner's account as well. So you should be able to copy and store information and continue to use that information later.
Right. And Ms. Reddy, can an attorney submitting registrations through their online account be signed into their account from multiple computers or IP addresses at the same time?
Yes. A petitioner as well as an attorney can be signed into their My USCIS account from more than one computer, or they can be signed in from different devices at the same time. It will not, if you sign in from your phone, it won't throw you off if you then sign in from your computer. So yes, you can do that.
Right. Right, and Ms. Reddy, can multiple accounts be created under a single attorney's name? In case of system malfunctions or an account getting locked out?
Yes, you can create multiple accounts, and this is true for petitioners as well. But each account has to have a unique email address. So using the same email address, you cannot create two accounts. But using two different email addresses, you can definitely create two separate accounts or multiple accounts. And this is useful for attorneys if they have paralegals and they have a lot of cases, two different paralegals um, handling registration at the same time. They can submit it parallelly through two different accounts, but you just have to be careful whether it be companies doing that again for the same benefit, because maybe they have two different teams submitting registrations because they have that so many registrations. You have to make sure there's no duplicates. So, but yes, you're allowed to create two different accounts as long as you use two different email addresses.
Right, right. And what about a petitioner or an employer using the same email for two different USCIS account types?
So as I was saying, a petitioner or whoever it is, employer cannot use the same address for two different accounts. To be able to participate in the electronic registration process, they have to have two separate email addresses if they're using two different accounts, and they have to be select H1B registrant as the type of account.
Right. And Ms. Reddy, could you tell us what information is required for the electronic registration process?
Sure. Just to go through it very quickly, from the registrant or the company, we need the legal name of the company, we need the DBA name or doing business as name, the federal ID number, the US office mailing address, and of course the first name, last name, middle name, and title, and contact information of the person who is going to be signing the petition. And for the beneficiary, we need the legal name, the gender, the date of birth. We need to know whether the person qualifies under the master's cap or the bachelor's cap. So we need, you have to submit degree copies because the master's cap has to be from a public or non-profit accredited institution. So we have to first make sure that the US organization qualifies and make sure you have a master's degree from such an institution. So that's why we always ask for the degree. Beneficiaries, country of birth, citizenship, passport number. So these are the few important items that are required when you're doing registration. The system will not allow you to reuse beneficiary information from previous email registration. So if you've done the registration last year and you want to, and the person didn't get picked, you'll have to unfortunately enter all that information in again. And it's better to submit updated information because some information might have changed. So we always ask for an updated checklist from our clients. Also, you need to remember that the system times out if it's idle for more than 15 minutes, and then you have to log in again. Therefore, make sure you have all the information in front of you before you start filling out the application. Usually, if there is some typographical error on the registration, the H1B petition will not be rejected, but an explanation will be required to show that, for example, the person is the same person that registered. So if there's a name spelling error, then we'll have to submit a copy of his passport to show that it's the same person.
Right, right. And Ms. Reddy, will any information regarding the offered position need to be provided as part of the electronic H1B registration process?
So the position, the job description, job title is not mentioned in the registration process, so we don't have to think about that right now. But nevertheless, in our law firm, we believe that it's a best practice to evaluate the offered position and the credentials before we actually submit the registration. This is so that we can submit, once we submit the registration, and if it's picked, then we will not have a problem filing the actual H1B petition. Because if a registration is done and then we find out that the position doesn't qualify for a H1B, or we find out that the beneficiary doesn't have a bachelor's degree in that required area, then we won't be able to do the H1. So we would be then filing a frivolous registration, and that could be a problem.
Right, right. And Ms. Reddy, will attestation be required as part of the electronic registration process?
Yeah, there are different kinds of attestations that will be required, and some attestations have been added on this year. This is all to prevent fraud and to prevent the frivolous use of the registration system, and to prevent people from filing frivolous registrations and not actually filing H1B petitions. And so that is still happening, but there are some attestations to that effect that USCIS hopes will stop people from frivolously filing or just entering incorrect information. So at the time of submitting the registration, the signator, so the petitioner, is required to certify under penalty of perjury that they have reviewed the registration and that all the information contained in the registration is complete, true, and correct. And also that the authorized signator or the organization on whose behalf the registration is being done intends to actually file that H1B petition, that they're not filing it frivolously and making use of a registration number when somebody else could have made use of it. So the authorized signature is required to provide an electronic signature saying that they are intending to file a H1 for that particular person if the registration gets picked, and they have to enter their full name, etc. In addition to that, they also have to attest that they have read everything and all the information provided in the registration is correct. As of FY 2024, they've also added a clause which says, I further certify that this registration or these registrations reflects a legitimate job offer, and that I or the organization on whose behalf this registration is being submitted have not worked with or agreed to work with another registrant, petitioner, agent, or other individual or entity to submit a registration to unfairly increase chances of selection of the beneficiary or beneficiaries in the submission. So basically what this means is that the petitioner has to attest to the fact that they have not colluded or joined together with some other company or group of companies to file the same registration for the same person. So file multiple registrations for the same person with the intent to get that beneficiary to increase his chances of getting selected in the lottery. If USCIS discovers that the petitioner in fact did work with another company, they will find that the registration was not properly submitted, and they will not allow you to file a petition, or after you have filed the petition, USCIS can also revoke the petition. And they can also refer the company for prosecution because you have attested to the fact that you will not collude with another company, etc., etc. And if you have done that, then they can, it's a criminal offense, so they can refer to you for fraud. So in addition, a petitioner may only have one registration submitted per beneficiary, right? So they cannot submit multiple registrations for a single beneficiary. Only the initial registration period, only once the initial registration period has closed, if, say, by mistake, the petitioner has more than one registration submitted for the beneficiary, then it's possible that they can delete the duplicate registrations even if they find out later. Otherwise, USCIS will invalidate all the registrations for that beneficiary. It's not like they'll keep one and invalidate the rest. If they see that you have submitted duplicate registrations, they will pretty much remove all the registrations. So you'll be left with nothing. But there is a system in place in the portal for you to identify duplicate registrations. Now, this system in place doesn't identify duplicate registrations within the present pending submissions, if you have not yet submitted, say you have a draft of submissions which you have not yet submitted, it will not identify duplicates in that, but it will identify duplicates in cases that have already been submitted. Say you're doing it in batches of 2 or 3. If you have submitted in the first batch and hit submit and paid the fee, etc., and you try to submit the same beneficiary in the second batch, then it will alert you to that. But within the same batch, if you have included the beneficiary's name twice, it will not. But they have a way of downloading into Excel, and you can then, check for duplicates. You can download into a CSV file, and that way you can identify duplicates. And this is very useful, especially if you have hundreds of registrations.
Right.
So when you delete that, if you discover after filing that you have duplicate registrations, and if you delete, as I said, you can delete one of those submissions, or whatever the duplicate submissions are, you will not get a refund of the $10 fee. So just something to keep in mind. They will take the fee.
Right. Before moving forward with other questions, Ms. Reddy, we just received a question on the show, and it reads: if a person on tourist visa marries a US citizen, when can she travel? Can she travel upon receiving an advance parole, or wait until the green card arrives?
So if the person is on a visitor's visa and is in the country, then they will wait for 90 days, because you don't want to file a green card as soon as you come in on a tourist visa, because there's an intent issue. So you'll wait for 90 days and then file your 485, and hopefully that should cure the intent issue. And then you have to wait for your advance parole before you can actually travel outside the country, because if you do not wait for your advance parole, and if you leave the country while your 485 is pending, they will deny your 485. So you have to wait for advance parole.
Right. I hope that answered your question. Thank you for asking. And Ms. Reddy, the next question is: will an LCA or a labor condition application be required as a part of the electronic registration process?
So no, an LCA is not required to complete a registration process, because we don't know whether the registration will be accepted or not. So it may not make sense to file a registration. But again, some attorneys and petitioners prefer to prepare the LCA so that they can submit it as soon as they get information about the registration. Because if you're in a rush, you can prepare it in advance and keep, but you don't require to have it when you're actually doing the registration.
Right. And Ms. Reddy, can attorneys or law firms submit electronic registration on behalf of the clients?
Yeah, absolutely. And just one more thing with reference to the LCAs, it might make sense sometimes to file it, because, or even if not to file it, at least do an analysis of whether an LCA can be filed or not, because you'll have to do the wage survey, and you have to see, you might want to look and see if the offered position wages are matching with the wage that's given by DOL, because there's a requirement that you have to pay the prevailing wage. And if you don't, then you cannot really file the H1 then. So then it becomes a frivolous registration. So it might make sense to at least do the groundwork for filing the LCA, even if you don't actually submit it. So that's just another thing that I wanted to bring to your attention. But yeah, so attorneys, yes, attorneys or law firms can submit and do submit electronic registrations on behalf of clients. The way it works is the attorney creates an account, and the petitioner also creates an account, and then the petitioner shares the email address of the account that they created. And when the attorney enters the registration and prepares the registration, that automatically goes into the petitioner's account. The attorney, the way they can access, the petitioner can access it is the attorney sends them a code. There's a unique code when a registration is created. So as long as you enter that code, the petitioner can then verify the G28, verify the registration information, and then they can sign and affirm that everything is correct. If you remember, we talked about those different attestations. Once they do all that and click submit, then the attorney can then go ahead and put in the fee information for the $10 fee and submit the registrations.
Right. And Ms. Reddy, can somebody edit the registration after it's been submitted?
No. Unfortunately, after it's submitted, you cannot edit the registration, but you can delete it. That's the only thing you can do.
Right. And once, what about once you submit a registration, can you add later, more beneficiaries if it's still within the registration period?
Yes, you can add more beneficiaries as long as it is within the registration period. There is a limit to the number of beneficiaries that you can do in one sitting under one batch. I think it's 250 is the limit. So once you reach that limit, then you have to again create a new batch and then do the registrations for the next remaining cases that you have. It's easier to do it batch-wise because you can make a payment at one time. But the limit is 250, and you can continue submitting registrations until the registration period is open.
Right, and the number is reached.
Well, the number, you don't know whether it's reached or not. They will only do a lottery. So the registration period is open until the 17th. And whatever registrations they get by noon 17th, they will then put it into a lottery. And the number is always, 4 or 5 times what they need. So that's why they have a lottery. And so they put it into the lottery, and by March 31st, you will know whether you're selected in the lottery or not.
Right. And tell me about this, Ms. Reddy. If an employer submits multiple beneficiaries, let's say 10 names per registration, and later identifies that the employer needs to withdraw one of these 10 names, does the system force the employer to withdraw all 10 names that have been submitted in that registration, thereby requiring the employer to resubmit the 9 names that he or she did not desire to withdraw from the system?
So you can delete. Once you submit a registration, you get a 19-digit confirmation number. So they become individual registrations, even though you're submitting them as a batch. So you can pick and choose which registration you want to delete, and delete that one registration without impacting any of the other registrations.
Right. Okay. That's great. And what payment method will USCIS accept for the $10 registration fee, Ms. Reddy?
You can either put in a credit card, or you can submit an ACH payment.
And if an employer is registering multiple beneficiaries, can the employer pay for all of their registrations at once?
Yes. So the credit card transaction limit, the US Department of Treasury has a certain transaction limit that they can only process that many credit card transactions per day. And because of this whole H1B registration scenario, which came into the picture fairly recently, they had to increase that credit card limit from 24,000, almost 25,000 to almost 40,000 per day. So they have quite a big credit card limit from their side. With reference to the employer's side, as I said, it's a batch of 250. So for that 250, you can pay at one shot for all the registrations. And then if you have more than 250 registrations, then you create another batch, and then you pay for them accordingly.
Right. And who pays the $10 registration fee, Ms. Reddy? I mean, is it the employer, the legal representative, or anybody else? Like, will the beneficiaries be allowed to pay for the registration fee at least?
So the beneficiary is not supposed to pay the registration fee. It has to be, as in all H1B petitions, because it's an employment-based petition. The registration fee has to be paid either by the employer or by the legal representative, that is the attorney.
Right. And how does USCIS notify the attorneys and employers of the selection and the lottery, Ms. Reddy?
Well, after the initial registration process closes, which is on the 17th, USCIS will conduct the initial selection process, and the account holder who submitted the registration receives a notification from USCIS via email or text, depending on what method they chose, stating that there's some activity in their account. Then they'll have to log into their account and see, most probably the activity will be that they've seen that there's some submissions that have been accepted. So you'll go to your online portal and the accepted submissions. So there are different acronyms or words used for the processing of the case. So submitted means that you have submitted the application for registration successfully. Selected means that it has been selected under the lottery. Not selected means it hasn't been selected under the lottery. So these three things, so you can, when you get a notification from USCIS that there's some activity, you should go and check and see if any of your cases have been selected. And if they've been selected, then the selection notice will be attached as a PDF, which you can then print and then send out along with your H1B petition. Another notification is also denied. So it's submitted, selected, not selected, and denied. This is if a registration is actually denied. Denial can occur if the credit card fee didn't go through, or your whatever fee you paid didn't go through, or if you've done duplicate registrations. This can lead to denial of your registration. So you should know by March 31st whether your cases have been selected or not.
Right. And what happens to the registrations that are not selected in the random selection, Ms. Reddy?
If they're not selected in the lottery, they'll remain in submitted status until USCIS decides that they have enough cases and completely closes the lottery. So until then, it'll be submitted, and then once they completely close it, it'll be not selected. For example, USCIS may submit, may have a lottery, conduct a lottery now. After March 17, they will conduct a lottery now, and then they will select a certain number of petitions. Then those petitions have to be submitted within 90 days by June 30th. So by June 30th, if USCIS sees that all the registrations that have been picked have not been, H1Bs have not been submitted for them, then they will conduct another lottery. Usually what they say is they include more people in the lottery than they are actually H1B numbers, so that they are taking into account for those people who don't file the H1s after being selected on the registration. But sometimes they may miscalculate this, and if they have not selected enough people, because they want to make sure all the H1Bs are being used, the numbers are being used, they might conduct another lottery. And so when they conduct that other lottery, like in 2021, they had 3 lotteries. So last year they had only 1 lottery. They didn't have any additional lotteries. So it really depends on how, on what basis they're selecting, and whether they decide to choose more people in the first batch itself, or they use caution and then go step by step. So once the final lottery takes place, then you will get a not selected notice. Until then, it'll just say submitted.
Right. And Ms. Reddy, with that, we come to the last question for this session. When will the petitioners be able to begin filing petitions for selected registrations, Ms. Reddy? I mean, how long will they have to file the petitions after they are selected?
So they have 90 days filing period for filing the petitions from April 1 to June 30th. And if there are any subsequent lotteries, as I said, then they'll be provided an additional 90 days after that, after the second lottery or the third lottery takes place. So every lottery that you have 90 days to submit a petition. The selection notice will tell you when to submit, when is the deadline, where to submit it. So it'll give all that information so that you can properly submit your registration.
Right. So with that, Ms. Reddy, we come to the end of this session for this week. And we do have another session before the big lottery happens. So we can hopefully continue the same sessions. And it's always right, Ms. Reddy. And it's always a privilege to host somebody like you, Ms. Reddy, who gives us all the information up to date. And thank you for also answering our questions so patiently, Ms. Reddy.
Thank you, Tony. Take care.
You too, Ms. Reddy. You're watching Sakshi Live. This is Thorni. Thank you.